Savage had a rehearsed answer. Classified. Easterly called from the cabin. Savage stood and started up front but turned back, blocking the overhead light. He steadied himself on the seat backs until he reached the curtain and disappeared. What do you think, Ray? I think they're invading Cuba and we're caught in the middle of the whole damn thing. Patch closed his eyes as he spoke. Everything is hanging in the balance here. All my responsibility. An invasion shouldn't have happened. He felt Meynkewitz's hand on his wrist and he opened his eyes. Our responsibility. Patch closed his eyes and the hum of the engines almost put him to sleep. When he opened his eyes, Savage emerged from behind the curtain and looked confused. Your girlfriend, Kincaid. Patch leaped from the seat. What happened? Rosselli. He must have been drunk. Patch held Savage's wide shoulders. Tell me what happened. They brought her to the Hotel Fontainebleau. Same place they brought you. The Trafficanti suite. No, this is crazy. Meinkewitz also stood. Try us. They left her in the front room. The busboy was there. He said she became white, glowing, and then her image began shrinking. The image reddened and then shrunk away. This is stupid, a put-on. Rosselli is trying to make me think this. Point is that she's gone. Pat shook his head and fell back in the seat. Retrograde, whispered Meinkewitz in his ear. Savage mumbled something about calling Rosselli, then he disappeared behind the curtain. Patch gripped the armrest. Meinkewitz leaned over. Patch, how many minutes had elapsed before you got back to the chamber? What do you mean, Ray? I'm trying to find a way to determine the difference between the time she left and the time you left. If you're trying to predict retrograde, then forget it. The chamber was in the midst of a power-up, and I don't know exactly when Kate came back. And you'll never know when you'll be pulled back. Now she's in the future, Ray. Through the engine's drone, Patch looked at his own dim image in the dark window. A few stars shone through the cabin light. His thick hair and tanned face hardly reflected his inner turmoil. He worried about Kate as he turned back to Meinkewitz. Retrograde is like dying. You just never know. Chapter 28. Over the Cuban north coast, Monday, April 17, 1961, 4:35 a.m. The small plane's engine grinded in the brightening sky under lofty gray dab clouds and traced a course over the convoluted, rugged green felt mountains. These are the Escambray Mountains, perfect hiding place if the operation gets messed up. This is the Bahia de Conchinos. It makes me nervous. Patch remained absorbed with Kate's retrograde as the plane banked over a huge water inlet indistinct in the pre-dawn glow. Cienfuegos, said Savage over the engine clatter as he checked the map. He placed the binoculars over his eyes. Ah, the ships are in place. Resourceful easily then followed the straight railroad track lines inland. The grassy swamp, sandwiched between the shore and the darkened inland, loomed like a mysterious gray behemoth. The city near the beach glowed with an array of bright lights. What's with the lights? Giron, Blue Beach area. The outline of ships anchored in the bay offshore became clearer in the pre-dawn light. Others floated silently along the elongated Bay of Pigs. The plane banked over the Zapata swamp. Okay, ya agarramos. Covadonga ahead, right on target. 80 degrees, 12 minutes north, replied easterly. 80 degrees, 15 west. 41-foot elevation, gentlemen. We're going in. Where? Into that swamp? Savage's annoying sandpaper laugh preceded his response. Ha! We'll see if the crocodiles are biting this morning, Professor. Once they passed over the swampy inlets, grasslands, and bush, the plane dipped and came in even lower. They swept across the scattered treetops. Patch wondered how easterly would clear the trees and maneuver into a solid open area. There's nowhere to land. Easterly looked over his shoulder. Now set her down before Castro sends out those sea furies, said Savage. John Rosselli is paying you for this, so you shut your mouth. Meinkewitz smiled as Patch looked out the window. Clearing no more than a few hundred feet wide with a small marshy lake on the north side came into view just ahead. The plane pitched and yawed and the engines cut back as they cleared the scrubby trees. The grass and soil blurred as they flew just above a darkened swatch of swamp water. The wheels hit the spongy ground. The plane bounced up and then quickly returned to earth. Patch's seatbelt tightened as the plane slid sideways and careened toward a bushy edge of the swamp. Easterly gained control of the plane and steered it in a huge semicircle within a few feet of the foliage. Meinkewitz pretended to pray as they came to an abrupt stop near the wooded scrub. Savage stood near the door with his pack fully in place. "What now, Savage?" "Get your asses in gear!" Savage popped the door and leaped outside. "I hate that son of a bitch," said Patch. "Well, join the club," said Meinkewitz as he hoisted on his pack. Patch pulled the strap over Mienkewitz's shoulder. Then he swung up his own pack, grabbed his rifle, and called out to Easterly, "Hey, Harold, you're the best." Easterly, still in the pilot's seat, adjusted his white cap and nodded.
"I know that. You guys give him hell."
Patch followed Meinkewitz to the opening. He put his hand on Mienkewitz's shoulder and jumped onto the grass. Meinkewitz backed outside and Patch grabbed him around the waist. He swung his friend to the ground and slid his rifle out of the plane. Savage stood in his green fatigues in front of the bushes. He panned the binoculars across the grassland and trees. The plane's engines never stopped. Easterly looped in a small circle and occasionally skidded on the grass. A smattering of green and brown paint on the plane's surface blended in with the terrain as he raced forward. He gained altitude sharply at the trees and lifted into the brightening sky. A warm quiescence slowly replaced the whining engine. Savage marched across the field and threw down his pack and pulled out the map. 1,400 Cubans are being brought in on those transport ships. This is the first step, gentlemen, in eliminating Castro. The Central Australia sugar mill on the road to Playa Lago is where they'll need to go once we advance. I'm going to be the son of a bitch who killed Castro. I agree with half of that statement, said Meinkewitz, and Patch laughed. What's so damn funny, Kincaid? You're about to go into combat. So we moved through this grassy area toward Blue Beach, asked Patch, still grinning. You make it sound like it's around the next bend. We're talking over 20 miles. We head west and shadow the Sand Blaze Road to stay clear of our own paratroopers. Patch stepped forward. I'll let them know not to shoot you. You better watch your backside, Tenderfoot. Patch smiled as he raised the binoculars and panned the opening. He spotted a few birds and an owl in one of the trees. As he packed the binoculars away, he noticed a walkie-talkie clipped to Savage's belt. Savage also pulled something out of his playbook. Meinkewitz looked over his shoulders. Is this Carlos Sánchez? Patch swatted away one of the annoying mosquitoes. He studied a folded, glossy picture of Carlos Sánchez at a Castro rally, probably in Havana. Carlos's short, dark haircut and slimmer build contrasted with the puffy-faced man with the peppered hair back at Sector 13. The pug nose and surly grin had not changed. You contacted him by radio? Negative, trust me. He's coming down from the Bonaventura resort. When will he head out? Asked Meinkewitz. You let me handle this, said Savage, looking into the bush and then at his oversized military watch. We have to move our collective asses, gentlemen. He thinks he's going to defect, correct? Asked Patch. Savage twisted in the grass. Then you get your big chance, Kincaid. He again turned toward the bushes. Hey, Savage, said Patch as they started across the gnarly branches. What is it? He asked as he kept moving. Watch your backside. Zapata Swamp, 6:30 a.m., Monday, April 17, 1961. Half an hour ago, a C-46 had roared across the bay. A cluster of puffy, shadowy parachutes floated downward to a point Savage estimated to be near the Sand Blaze Road junction. In the open grass, Patch heard more aircraft. A huge B-26, combat-colored and propeller-driven, started a long swoop from the north. Savage's walkie-talkie crackled and muffled explosions and small arms fire in the distance kept him pacing like a nervous chicken in the barnyard. This is Checkpoint 7, B-26 spotted north of Sand Blaze, Cuban flag on wings. We best get back into the bush, said Patch. Come on, Ray. Checkpoint 7, can you hear me? Patch leaped over a fallen log. He and Meinkewitz continued a few feet inside the foliage. For several minutes they trekked along the grass and mushy ground. Savage finally approached from behind and shouted something into the walkie-talkie. A few minutes later, with the radio in his hand, he sprinted across the grass. Machine gun fire erupted over the ocean to the south. Savage's mouth hung open as he stared. We're moving out. Brilliant, said Patch, shaking his head. Was that a Cuban or an American plane? Asked Meinkewitz. Savage slapped a mosquito on his neck. What do you think I am, a hawk? It was a Cuban plane, said Patch. I saw the flag on the wings. Like you know, Kincaid? Savage leaped quickly like a kangaroo through the bush. They followed him south for a few minutes. Then his walkie-talkie sounded. Savage held out the radio. Jesus Christ. Patch skipped over a small inlet stream. What is it now? They're firing on our small harbor boats, the bastards. Patch closed his eyes. We are invading their island. You need to tell me what time that we're supposed to link up with Carlos Sánchez. I can't do that yet. I have my orders. You're a pain in the ass, you know that? I'll take care of you later, Kincaid. Go right ahead. Across the grass to the west, the bulky B-26 looped over the swamp several times. A trail of dark smoke spewed behind the plane as it veered northward toward the ground. A second later, it vanished over the treetops miles away. A flash and ensuing fireball headed upward. The rumble shook the swamp. We got him, said Meinkewitz. Yeah, said Savage, stomping back into the high grass. Patch made a sour face at Savage. He listened as he thought he heard jets, but he couldn't see them. He removed his field glasses and immediately caught sight of a C-46 transport's propellers. In some type of signal or gesture, the plane dipped, but more machine gun fire echoed back through the swamp as Savage started southing. Patch and Meinkewitz high-stepped through the brush behind him. Savage quickly established a fast pace as he exited onto the grass. Patch looked north over his shoulder. They were halfway across the bristly brown swamp grass when the sound of more jets from the north boomed louder. A small blue and green plane skimmed the treetops and trailed another B-26 above the beach. Patch and Meinkewitz both dove onto the grass, but Savage nonchalantly stepped through the swamp grass and spoke into the walkie-talkie. He's gonna get himself killed, said Meinkewitz. C'est la vie. When the planes flew farther away, Patch and Meinkewitz jogged toward Savage, 75 yards ahead of them. Are you crazy? Asked Patch as he caught up with the sergeant. Cuban sea furry. They can do as much damage as the bigger planes, said Savage as he marched ahead. Patch heard more jets and swung his binoculars into the morning sky. Two jets approached the bay at a high altitude. A muffled explosion shook the ground. Savage plodded about 100 feet ahead. He turned as Meinkewitz and Patch leaped over the fallen trees. The Houston has a friggin' hole in its stern and has run aground. Let's just get down to Blue Beach, said Meinkewitz. Between the static, somebody reported that the machine gun fire had hit another ship. They hit the Barbara J, too. They're encountering the enemy up at Playa Largo. Well, we're in the other direction from Playa Largo, said Patch. Savage marched 10 feet ahead in the shade. Getting nervous, Kincaid? Or are you just plain scared? No, I'm getting an itchy trigger finger. Savage's hand slowly slid up his own weapon. Patch looked at Meinkewitz, and Meinkewitz, now donning an olive baseball cap, grinned. You never know when you're going to have to shoot.
Chapter 29.
Zapata Swamp, east of San Blas, Monday, April 17th, 1961, 7:03 a.m. Savage adjusted his pack and pushed his way out of the bushes again. Troops lingered on the road across the swamp. Patch turned quickly. Paratroopers are on the road. I'm aware of that, Kincaid. We're losing time. Patch shook his head as Savage sprinted. Meinkewitz increased his pace. Follow him, Patch. Pray he knows what he's doing. Patch's thoughts centered on Kate. She had left 1961, but where in the future had she landed? How much had his actions affected that future? He lifted his feet over the high grass as the gunfire continued further west. Savage suddenly darted to the left, toward a couple of tall palms and more bush. Patch slowed for Meinkewitz, who waved him forward, but he waited and jogged next to his friend. They hiked diagonally away from the road. Savage waited for them at the clearing's edge. Take some water. We're getting closer. What about Carlos? Asked Patch, and he poured the warm canteen water into his dry throat. Savage squinted and bit his lower lip. Not yet. He snapped his helmet in place and pushed the bush branches back. Meinkewitz wiped his mouth and screwed the top back on his canteen. Say, he's a nice guy. Yeah, right, just like El Barbudo. Who's that? Castro or Blackbeard the Pirate. Take your choice. Bypass Road, Zapata Swamp, Monday, April 17, 1961, 9:30 a.m.